If you find yourself saying yes when there's part of you that is just screaming no, you are not alone, and there's a lot of reasons that this happens and why it makes sense that it happens. My name is Rachel. I'm a somatic therapist and coach. In this video, I'm going to give you a breakdown of some of the reasons why you might struggle to say no, bringing in awareness of the nervous system and understanding the physiological reactions that happen that make it really hard to say no. Then I'm going to go into some tips about what you can do in order to kind of start to shift out of that pattern. And then finally, I hope you stick around to the end. I will give you a little practice that you can use to support you in feeling a little more confident in saying no. So, to really understand what makes saying no hard or putting boundary in place hard, you have to understand your nervous system, kind of these physiological aspects that are impacting you. Because often there's advice, you get a little script of how to set a boundary. You know you should set a boundary. That might be helpful a little, but your body often is screaming with these alarm bells that it's not safe, that there's something wrong. There's a lot of anxiety that comes up when you're trying to say no or set a boundary with someone. So it's really important to understand what might be going on, why that's happening, so you know what to do with it. So one of the things we want to think about is really we're wired for connection. So anything we're doing, especially when we were younger, when we were growing up, our body is wiring, learning how to relate to other people, and it's giving us signals if we're safe or not. So if you grew up in a household where you weren't allowed to have needs, or you weren't allowed to have boundaries, you weren't allowed to express yourself, then boundaries or saying no is going to really bring up a threat response in your body, which then makes it hard to think clearly, to be able to really do the thing of saying no, even if logically you know you want to. So I'm going to go through 5 a little deeper reasons what's going on in terms of the nervous system when you're saying no. So you have an idea, maybe you relate to some of these, maybe you relate to all of them, just to understand why your body is reacting the way it does. So the first one we want to think about is that disappointing other people may bring up a threat response in the system. So when you say no, when you feel like you might disappoint someone, that triggers something in your body that lets you know that that might be a threat. That might be a threat to your relationship. And when you are a young baby, a threat to the relationship is actually a threat to your safety, to your existence. So that's why there might be this big reaction. And it, especially if you're more aware or attuned to other people's emotions, there is just a level of like overwhelm that comes when you feel like someone's disappointed. It makes you feel like you did something wrong. And so then your body's responding like there's a threat. And then when there's a threat, one way we kind of react to that is an adaptive way is we appease. So then we might just say yes, or we might try to caretake the other person in order for us to stay safe. It's a very just adaptive way to move through the world. We don't need to judge it or blame ourselves for it. It's how you stayed safe. And then there might be this way that guilt arises in the process of saying no, of prioritizing yourself, of creating a little space for yourself, of not meeting someone else's needs. Guilt is something I hear often. It may be something you experience because there's probably something, and this could be stuff with your parents or your family, it could be cultural, it could be power dynamics. So based on what you've learned in terms of your gender, in terms of your race, your socioeconomic status, all of these things, there's messages about what you should be doing, whose needs should be prioritized. All of that lives in the body. So there might be guilt that is coming up that one could just be from your experiences with your family, but I also want to be really broad that that guilt can come from social conditioning as well, because it's a threat to belonging. And belonging is one of our innate human needs. So if you don't feel like you're going to belong, if you're kind of outside the pack, then of course you're going to respond to this sense of guilt that you're doing something wrong. It could even go into shame that you are going to be kind of left outside the pack. And so that might make it really hard to be able to say no. That fear that you're not going to belong, that you're going to be left to fend for yourself. Obviously, it's probably not that in your logical mind, but on a physiological level, that is what's happening. The third one, and I mentioned this a little bit in the last one, is that there could be actual power dynamics at play. So there's the reality that we move through the world, we have different levels of power and privilege to impact our own experience, to impact other people's experience. And if you are in a situation where someone has control over your experience, if that's a caregiver, if that is your boss, it could be a partner, it could be a friend even, right? If there's differential power dynamics happening, it could also be about knowing levels of privilege in society and knowing that maybe you have a less privileged identity than someone else. So there's those power dynamics at play. And so there's a little more fear that arises, again, very adaptive, when you have to say no and there's power dynamics at play, because intuitively you know the stakes are higher than if you are on like a level playing field with someone. And the caveat to this is sometimes it isn't always true that saying no is necessarily a threat. And so I think there's ways that you have to be really discerning around when the power dynamics, you really do have to navigate them. That's reality, like that is life for a lot of people. And there's times that maybe you have more power than you realize in a situation. So I think it's just important to differentiate those two. Another reason might be that you have been conditioned to overgive. So let's say you grew up in a household where people were kind of a mess. That could be for many different reasons, but that led you to being the one to kind of keep everyone together, to make sure everyone was okay. You kind of overfunctioned in this broken or underfunctioning family. Those are kind of harsh words, but that level of understanding that you were the one doing a lot to make sure everyone was okay. And so then you get conditioned to believe that that's your role. That's how you're supposed to be in the world. And if you're not fulfilling that role, then it's a threat because you did that to stay safe in that system. And I think, again, this comes out to larger dynamics too of all the people, all of you who are doing amazing things in the world. You're overfunctioning in this broken system. And you're doing it to make sure everyone is safe, not just you. But when that is the way you operate in the world, when you just do even probably a lot more than other people do, then it feels like you're not doing enough. And that might, again, bring this threat response on that you're not filling that role that has kept you safe. So again, these adaptive ways your body is trying to keep you safe, even if in the moment you don't need that strategy, maybe you could do less and you would still be safe. But it's these kind of patternings in your body that make it really hard to shift it. The final thing I want to mention is that I think sometimes you might underestimate the power you have to say no, for it to be respected and to be honored. Because maybe your experiences with the no for certain people were never honored. It's like your boundaries, like you put it up and someone would just come and smack it down. But there's a lot of people, I am sure, in your life who would respect that no, who would honor that no. And it's when you're just conditioned, your body is making a generalization, like it's not safe to say no. But in reality, it might not be emotionally safe to say no with certain people and not everyone. So I think it's really important to understand that the body, it's working hard, it is trying to keep you safe, and sometimes it's working with information that isn't necessarily grounded in what's happening with that person in that relationship. So now hopefully you have a better understanding of what might be happening that leads to the body response, the anxiety, the fear of just saying no to something. Now I want to give you a few things to think about that might be helpful in starting to shift this pattern and taking back a little more personal power to be able to say no and set those boundaries when you need to. The first thing to think about is really working with the nervous system. So as you saw in that last part of the video, so much of what you're experiencing is really in the body, in the nervous system. So it's important to be able to really find practices that work to help create safety within your body. So we'll end with a practice that is usually pretty helpful to help reduce anxiety. But there's also so many other videos I have on my channel if you want to check them out with longer somatic practices so you have more tools to work with. The second thing to think about is how do you really work with the discomfort that comes up when you say no? So part of that is being able to work and be a little more present with that discomfort and be able to differentiate when that discomfort is getting into the place of pain, you can't take it, and then when it's just discomfort, and how to practice being okay with being uncomfortable. And that is both your own emotions and someone else's emotions. And usually it's very hard, especially when you are a caring person, to sit with someone else having an emotional response to something you have said or done. And then the next one going off of that is that you have to remember that you are not responsible for another adult's emotions. You are not responsible for how someone else responds to you honoring your own needs and experiences. And then you want to think about how do you practice this. So to get confident in anything, you need to practice doing it. And so sometimes it's easy to practice with people you know will respect your no, and with things that are low stakes. So how do you just start with these small ways of saying no? And then as you build your confidence, you get the response, because there will be people who are just going to say like, okay, and respect that. Some people will not. Those are the people that you're not starting with those people when you're practicing saying no. Those are the people you kind of like do the reps, you build up to, and you're ready at that point to then say no to someone who you know is going to have a big reaction, or you know will just kind of try to swat down that no. And then just practice, like do it again and again and again, and in different circumstances, you're going to build that confidence over time. And then the last thing I'm going to say is remember to sometimes you need to toggle out. So it can feel like this is me, there's something wrong with me, why can't I do this? Or these experiences of guilt or shame for having needs, for having wants and desires, for having preferences, for having limits. It's important to toggle out and remember that a lot of that can come from systems of oppression, from the ways that you're told how you're supposed to be in the world, especially women who, if you identify as a woman, you know that it's kind of ingrained in you from a very young age that you're expected to take care of everyone else's emotions. You're supposed to make sure everyone else is okay before yourself. So it takes a lot of being able to kind of zoom out and see that it's not just your experience, but it's part of a larger context. And as you do that, you can kind of take away a little bit of the intensity of the emotion. And when we get rid of that shame, that guilt, we're able to really see what's there. And sometimes that can help us also to connect to anger in a healthy way. So you have kind of the fuel to say the no. Because sometimes you need to let yourself feel that anger in order to really bolster, to lift up that no. And so you know what is important to you. When someone steps over that space, that anger can be a push to help you reinforce the no. So here is a simple practice you can use when you're doing the practice of saying no before you go to say no, to help reduce anxiety, to reduce some of the fear, it might not take it away completely, but what I often find is that it just takes the edge off a little, that it allows you a little more space to work with whatever's there. So it's a tapping practice. You could do it seated, you could do it standing, whatever's more comfortable for you. And we're going to start just at the top of the head, just loose fingers, and just start tapping the top of the head. You can tap all around in your own pattern, your own rhythm. And just taking your time with this. There's no rush. Cool. And then we're going to tap the eyebrows. So just tapping the tops of the eyebrows. And then under the eyes on the cheekbones. And then down to the jaw. And then tapping the collarbone. And then you will cross your arms in front of the body and tap down the sides of your torso. So under your armpit down to the waist, just tapping. And then you can just let your hands rest for a moment. Maybe closing your eyes or just bringing your eyes down to find a soft gaze. And just notice how you're feeling. I hope the practice helped you to feel a little more present, a little more grounded, a little more able to be with whatever emotions were present. And I hope you have some actionable things to help you to start to say no, even if it's just at those small little moments, to honor yourself, honor your needs in this world, because you deserve to have space for yourself. And if this video was helpful, let me know by giving it a like, commenting down below, and subscribe so you can stay up to date for more videos like this, as well as some more practice videos to get more tools so you can feel more grounded and energized throughout your day.